afternoon. Today's presentation will be about unionism in the 21st century. It's easy to say. The title of the program is Lighting Union Fires versus Putting Them Out. Seems like a unique or a strange title for unionism, but it truly does speak to what we have to do for workers in the 21st century. All of those young folks, not unlike yourselves, attached to a handheld device who think that all the knowledge in the world comes out of that little handheld device. Well, somebody made the handheld device, and that's what our union, the United Food and Commercial Workers, International Chemical Workers Union Council, does. We have about 22,000 workers in North America, representing workers in many different jurisdictions. Jurisdictions, for the sake of this discussion, mean types of work that workers do, and we represent those workers. And everything from homeless shelters in Connecticut to pharmaceutical manufacturers in Southern Virginia. That's the extent of the region that I represent, and I am Jerry Setley. I'm the Regional Director and Council Vice President for the International Chemical Workers Union Council. ICWUC, right? ICWU. Makes it easy if you're signing it. The outline for today's presentation will be the state of labor, not the state we live in, but the situation we're stuck with. What do unions do and why they matter to everyone? And that is the most important question today. Challenges for today's union, and they are many. Organizing and building stronger unions, and that's where the learning to light the union fire comes from. I want to comment on the picture that's here because that group of workers are some of the best union workers that I represent. And the reason they are is because they work in the state of Virginia, or the Commonwealth, as they like to say. The state of Virginia is what's referred to as a right-to-work state. And the professor said we can't make it a Q&A because you're all busy, but right-to-work means you don't have to belong to the union by virtue of your employment. Pennsylvania, where we are right now, is not a right-to-work state yet. I guess under the current governor, we don't have to worry about that. The last governor, yes, and maybe the next one. But right to work means you get to belong to the union of your own free will. They get to deduct dues out of your paycheck at your own free will. You get to decide that annually whether or not you want to continue to be a member as well. These folks in the picture work for one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And they didn't get big by showering their employees with money. They got big by optimizing profits. That's what businesses do. But they do it on the backs of labor. These folks have decided many years ago.
Do you mind going back to what the unions did with the money?
Sure. If I could remember what it was, since I don't have the script. The dues that are collected may be the question. Okay? The dues are collected by the unions, the local unions, and they're used for the administration of the local union. And a portion of the dues, I'm glad you raised that question, because it's a good portion of the dues are forwarded to the international union, which is the United Food and Commercial Workers Union that you also happily fingerspelled earlier. That money is used to administer the union. Turns out to be a paycheck for me, and an automobile which I drive around, and the gas I pour in it to operate it and take it to places like Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. But that is what the dues are used for. Not, as you will hear in right-to-work states, to buy candidates for union purposes so that the fat dogs can continue to be that. Anyhow, briefly back to Virginia. These people work for this huge pharmaceutical company, and they've decided and have to decide annually if they're going to continue to pay dues. They were chartered in 1945. I think they've decided to continue to pay dues. Labor in a cold climate and the decline of unions globally is the title of the next panel. It is a tough time to be a labor organizer, but it's also an optimistic time, as our charts will show in a little bit. It's tough in that government makes it very difficult in the United States to organize labor unions. We operate under two laws, the National Labor Relations Act and the Fair Standards Labor Act. Both were promulgated. There's a good word for you to spell. Both the laws started back in the 30s. Don't try to spell promulgated, it's too long. That was just to get your finger spelling skills up. Anyhow, the laws come from right before and right after World War II. And the reason the laws even started was because, and I look around this room with two exceptions, me and young Brian, women had to get into the workforce. Believe it or not, there was a day when women didn't work. And when women did start to work, because there were so many men overseas fighting a war, the women were smarter than the men. That has never changed. They said, wait a minute, we're being sold short here. We don't have the rights we ought to have in the workplace. So they pushed and fussed and carried on. And of course, Johnny came marching home, and the men came back from World War II, and they picked up the fight that the women had started and continued to build and grow labor unions. And we have them today, I think, basically because women had the fortitude to make the men do their job. Okay? But there are a lot of reasons for decline in today's labor movement. Primary among them, globalization. I'm sure most of you think that products that are made in Japan and Korea and China were always made in Japan and Korea and China. Fact of the matter is they weren't. They used to be made here, not far from where we're standing. They used to make steel. They made clothing. A lot of clothing in Pennsylvania. Well, as the fat cats of the 30s and 40s realized, if they went somewhere else and made their clothing and their steel with cheaper labor, they didn't have to charge as much and they'd make more. So it was a good day for them, bad day for workers. So globalization, free trade, we call it the race to the bottom. Or, for the sake of this discussion, the Walmart effect. I'll get into that a little more later. Changes in the organization of production and employment. Contracting out is the first thing listed. And it's ironic we should talk about that here, because my guess is a vast majority of you, when you go into the labor market, will be contractors. You're not going to be working for a university or for a company as the full-time interpreter, although that's a possibility. I think 70 or 80% of the people who graduate this program will be freelance interpreters. You're going to be contractors. That contracting out that is endemic in your profession has become very popular in many professions that are typically listed and called service professions, because it's cheaper for an employer to rent the labor than it is for them to pay for the labor as wage earners. Those wage earners have taxes, benefits, pensions, assorted costs, vacation, holidays, all those things that organized labor pushes for, contractors don't have. So that contracting out has certainly made it cheaper. Offshoring, making things in foreign countries and shipping them here. Especially small commodity items like cell phones, computers, things that are cheaper to ship than they are to make nearby. Lean production, I don't know why they put that in there, JIT, which stands for just in time, inventory. In the old days, you'd have, I'll go look in the back, and there actually was something in the back of the store that they could go look for. Now, there's a good chance if it's not on the shelf, the store doesn't have it. That's what you guys would see as just-in-time inventory. and the decline of job-based, workplace-focused employment. What I mean by that is many people don't go to a facility to do work anymore. And as I told the professor when I came in, my granddaughter was in math class when I left the house. I didn't go to her school to know that. She was sitting in the living room of my house in math class. That didn't happen when I was a kid, unless you had the mumps, and you weren't allowed around the other kids. Now, that's very common for schooling. You guys call it cyber school. Okay? It's also very common in much work. My oldest son is a computer engineer. Probably 90% of his work is done in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt in his living room with a laptop on his lap. That's different than what we've seen. Because when I worked for the first 32 years of my professional career, I went to a laboratory, a physical place where I did the work. That's not the norm anymore. A decline in large concentrated workplaces. You folks, I'm not sure where many of you are from, but I know at least one of you said they lived in Easton, which means you've probably driven through Bethlehem once or twice. Now we call it the Steel Stacks Arena, I think. When I was a kid, that was a coke oven. And not the kind that you use a little spoon for. The kind that you dump in with iron and limestone to make steel. A lot of those big industries are gone. Some because it's just cheaper to make it elsewhere. Some, and Bethlehem is the primary example, because the people running the business took their eye off the ball. Instead of improving and having research and putting money back into business, they took the money and put it in their pockets. It made the shareholders wealthy and made the workers ultimately poor. Because when they went bankrupt, not too terribly long ago, they took the pension and health care benefits of the retirees with them. And the transformation of an employment relationship. It says the decline in full-time, regular, permanent employment. Well, that's what I was for those 32 years, working as a full-time, permanent laboratory technician. What you guys in most cases will be, unless you're in even if you're in an educational setting, you'll be a part-time 1099 employee. 1099 is a division. It's a code in the IRS where you get a document at the end of the year saying what you were paid. You pay the taxes. You pay for your benefits. You put away money for your pension or retirement. It's a completely different relationship, and it's one of the other major reasons for the decline of the labor movement. And I think the most obvious is employer hostility and opposition to unions. As I introduced myself earlier, I said I'm a union organizer, and that's what I am at heart. Union organizing is what will grow and has grown unions over the last century. But employers used to think that the union could help them out because you took care of the problem employees. You took care of the nonsense on the shop floor. Now those other items that have caused the workforce to be more diverse and spread out has taken away from the desire of companies to deal with unions. They don't see it the same way as they used to. The fact is, I was in upstate New York yesterday with a company called TRW. They make the little fobs that you might see to get in your car. It's a little device that is keyless entry. You press a button and the door's open. Well, if you've had to replace one of those devices, you'll find out they cost about $250. The part cost for the employer is about $1.70. A little bit of markup there. The employees who they hire currently come in at $8.84 an hour, just over minimum wage federally standing. It's a crime. And that's an organized facility. So as you can imagine, places where there aren't unions, it's a lot worse. The state of organized